SVS Ultra has been around for quite some time, and I finally get to share my thoughts and opinions about the SVS Ultra's performance. Welcome back to New Record Day. Let's get started. Before we dive in, a disclaimer: I'm not being paid to say anything that I have to say about the SVS Ultras, nor do I expect to be able to keep the product based on my opinion and what I have to say about them. All of my thoughts and opinions, they are my own. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think about these speakers, and hopefully it is helpful getting them into the right homes. Now, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, last week we posted a complete and total teardown of the SVS Ultra. I would really encourage you to go and check out that video. It'll give you some context and insight as to some of the things that we're going to be discussing in today's review. I'll leave the link down below. If you notice in the intro, we've got the shit stack, and that is the first rig that I use with the SVS Ultras. I thought that made a lot of sense. That entire rig is going to be north of $3,000, so we do have to take that into consideration. But starting with the Freya Plus preamplifier, which is incredibly versatile, you can run it passive, you can do it in a buffered solid state mode, or you can run it with all tube glory, the Bifrost 2, and then a pair of Aegers. That rig is a fantastic match with the SVS Ultras and was probably my favorite if you are moving in the direction of transparency and soundstage. I think that sounded the most open, at least in my opinion. So that rig was awesome. Let me go ahead and grab the other two pieces that I used and we'll chat about those. All right, if north of 3,000 smackaroos is a little bit too rich for your blood, that is totally okay. The next contender here, which is the NAD M10, I have already reviewed this piece, and if you haven't checked out that review, please do so. This thing is rad. One of the things that I admire so much about this guy is its versatility with all of the features that are packed inside here, including Dirac. So for some of you folks that want to be able to seamlessly integrate the SVS Ultras with a subwoofer and do some bass management and some room correction, you will be able to do that, and in my experience, it sounds quite good, especially if you're focused on the lower frequencies when it comes to room correction. Either way, I use this guy. It was awesome, sounded great, and it was incredibly ballsy. So one of the key differences between this guy and the shit stack is this is 100 watts, and I think that is making some difference, but I think because of the room correction features and being able to give a little bit more of an even response and extending the SVS Ultras actually all the way down to 40 Hertz in room, I was able to do a little bit more in terms of bass department with this guy than I was with the shit stack. And what that ended up giving me was a little bit more punch and clarity within the bass and also the mid bass. So this guy is certainly worth checking out. But what if you don't want to spend north of $2,500 if you decide to get the SVS Ultras? Okay, now this guy is interesting. And no, this is not an SVS commercial. They did send this out to review. This goes with the SVS Ultras like peanut butter and jelly. It's a fantastic, absolutely great purchase at only $499.
What?
Yeah, you heard me right. $499, and guess what? You're done. There are a couple of things about this guy that you need to know. It is more of an amplifier from the future, and what I mean by that is you're not given a traditional remote. You're going to be running everything off of your smart device, your phone, tablet, etc., etc. The nice thing about this guy is you have 150 watts per channel to play with. It is Class D, and no, I'm not afraid to say that, and no, it does not bother me. I think this amplifier sounds fantastic with the SVS Ultras, and I would be hard-pressed to say that I can hear a huge difference in sound quality from this guy to the NAD M10, which is also Class D. Either way, this thing sounds ballsy, and it's able to wake up the SVS Ultras like nobody's business. So a great contender, a fantastic option. I only have one little oh, SVS. You had to do it to me. You had to do it. SVS. You guys are a company that has been built on the backs of subwoofers, and you give Ron from New Record Day one sub out?
No.
I want you to take out all this stuff and only have sub outs. I just want to see only sub outs on the back of this. You can't even plug in speakers, just subs. Listen, I'm gonna give some grace here. It's $499. Yeah, it doesn't have 2 sub outs. It's a bit of a bummer. It's not the end of the world. You can make it work. There's creative ways to make it work. It's not a huge deal breaker, especially at the price point. I would totally rock this with the SVS Ultras and be totally happy with this rig, especially if I'm trying to keep the cost down. Great choice, highly recommended, no doubt about it. Throughout the evaluation process, the cables that I use, both speaker cables and interconnects, are SVS branded cables. I've had these for many years, and any time that I'm doing a review for speakers or components that cost less than other cables that I have on the wall, I grab these because they work great and they're affordable. So links down below if you want to grab a pair. I think they're fantastic. So that is all the gear that I use throughout the evaluation process. Let me go ahead and grab the speakers and let's dive in. I think a good place to start is the finish. Actually, hold on a second. I always forget speaker grills. The SVS Ultra does come with speaker grills. This is probably a good place to start. They work fine. This is gonna be my first recommendation for SVS if you want some reviewer feedback. I don't mind the fasteners on this. It works, there's no problems, but maybe moving into magnetic fasteners for the speaker grill is probably gonna be a smart evolution. You guys seem to care about, you know, the little details, and I think that that little detail would be a cool evolution that I would like to see with future versions of the SVS Ultra. So with the grill off, this is what we have. We have a 2-way bookshelf loudspeaker. And as I mentioned in the teardown video, and I'm gonna mention it again, and I'm gonna emphasize it, I have seen and reviewed speakers upwards of $5,000 that don't hold a candle to the finish on this. So mad props to SVS for the finish. This is the piano gloss white. You can also get it in piano gloss black, and then this kind of black oak finish. If you're not getting these in the piano gloss white, you're doing it wrong, because this is gorgeous. I love the finish on these speakers. Good job, like really good job, SVS. At the end of the day, what you have done here, SVS, is you have given your customers a speaker that they can be proud to show off, and it looks gorgeous, so well done. And speaking of how they look and attention to detail, there's another thing that we need to mention. In the teardown video, I noted you do have these cuts on the sides here, and yes, it is confirmed this does help with diffraction on the front baffle. But what's cool about it is SVS didn't stop at that, and they could have. They also did these nice bevel cuts at the bottom, and so this cabinet looks really, really clean. And if you notice in the teardown video, the front baffle is an inch thick. So we've got a company out there that knows how to build a freaking cabinet, and they understand that you want as much mass as you can get on that front baffle. That's where the drivers are connected. You're gonna have a lot of vibration up there. So again, good job. The cabinet, no complaints. It is incredibly rigid. It is incredibly stout. You do have a nice brace in there, and I'm gonna say this right up front before we even get to the listening impressions. I don't hear any resonance in this speaker. I don't hear any vibrations or things that sound, that's a little bit weird. This sucker is a tank, so thumbs up, good job. Now, another thing that I noted in the teardown video is this port in the back. It has this kind of rubberized texture to it. I reached out to SVS. I asked them, is this doing anything? Does this really matter at the end of the day? And their response didn't really surprise me at all. I kind of had a feeling, no, it doesn't. But the reason they did it is they didn't want to just slap on any old plastic port. It's all about attention to detail. So they care enough to give us something a little bit more than most, if not all of the manufacturers are giving us at this $1,000 price point. So again, this is nice to see. And I think that others should step up the game and try a little bit harder, like SVS is clearly doing. Down at the bottom here, now that we're on the back, we do have 5-way binding posts. So this is gonna accept any kind of speaker connection that you can think of. And what's cool is you do have the option to do either by wire or by amping. If you want to do by amping, you just simply remove these little jumpers and you are ready to rock and roll. All right, on the business end of the speaker, we do have a 1-inch aluminum dome tweeter. And then down below, we have a 6.5-inch paper cone driver that is treated with this glass composite fiber. I think this is a very smart choice because what I've noticed, and I'm getting ahead of myself, is this guy sounds a lot like many paper cone drivers that I love so much. Let's jump into the listening impressions. Texture and tone in bass is something that once you hear it, and you're not just hearing notes being played, essentially well farts, that's neat, but any speaker can do that. But when you hear actual snap in texture and tone in bass, it's a game changer, and then you can't live without it. The SVS Ultra is capable of doing that, and it's one of the most impressive things about anything within the bass region. I will say this speaker doesn't extend crazy low. Depending on how close you have the speakers to the wall, that's gonna be a game changer. I don't play that game, I don't do that. I pull my speakers way away from the wall, and if you're interested in watching my little speakers setup tutorial for Soundstage, I'll leave that link down below and you can check it out. Either way, I would say safely, you can expect mid-40s to 50s in most rooms without any issues at all. Even still, I'm gonna say it, and we're gonna get it out of the way, you gotta have subs. And I said subs as in plural because this is new record day and you need 2 subs. So if only there was a company that sold subwoofers that we can talk about. I swear this is not an SVS commercial. They just make amazing subwoofers. And I've been daydreaming about what these things would sound like with a pair of SB3000s. Yeah, yes, please. That would be a killer rig and I would listen to that all day long and be totally satisfied. Now moving up into mid-range, specifically into male vocal territory, I was happy with the way these speakers sounded. They have just enough meat on the bones to keep things engaging and interesting, and at the same time, there is just enough detail retrieval to where you're not finding yourself getting bored and checking out. As I made my way through my playlist of audiophile treats, I noticed that every single male vocal that was being played out of the SVS Ultra sounded very good, very engaging, and I was happy with the presentation for sure. Now I will say this, female vocals for me on the SVS Ultras was hit and miss, and as we move into top end extension, we're going to be discussing this a little bit more in detail, but I will say that depending on the pitch of the actual female singer, if they start singing notes up higher, things started to sound a little bit sibilant at times. I noticed that there was an emphasis on some of the S's. Depending on the recording, depending on the singer, depending on who we're talking about, it was either really good to, okay, could be better. Now setting vocals to the side, anything instrument-wise within the mid-band, especially acoustics, had plenty of body, and at the same time, there was quite a bit of detail retrieval throughout the mid-band to where we had some fireworks. I liked it quite a bit. That sounded all really nice throughout the mid-band area, if you will. For the first time in New Record Day history, yes, we are going to actually bring up some measurements because I need to be able to describe what I think is happening, and if being the key word, so hear me clearly, if my measurements are correct and the response that we are looking at is correct, then everything that I subjectively heard from upper mid-range and beyond, it actually makes a lot of sense to me because I can see it and what I'm hearing matches with what I heard. And I want to stop here and just let you know, I don't measure speakers and then listen to them. That's not how I operate. I actually like to challenge myself to listen to the speakers and then do the measurements afterwards to see if what I was hearing is something that we can see in a measurement. And in this example, I think we can. So if you take a look at this measurement of the SVS Ultra, this is the frequency response of the SVS Ultra. One thing that is worth noting is there is a bit of a dip throughout the upper mid-range area, and then we see a rise starting at 10K and beyond. What's fascinating and what's interesting is, as I was listening to a lot of stuff with electric guitars, the electric guitars didn't have quite the same presence that some other speakers that might have a more linear response through the upper mid-range have. I found that they weren't really popping out of the mix as much. But at the same time, the top end of cymbals, not the initial attack of the cymbal, but the decay, the shimmer, the extension, the air, it seemed like it was a little bit emphasized. And so as we see this gradual rise from 10K up to 20K, this all actually makes sense. And not only do we see it in the frequency response, which, by the way, does not tell you what a speaker sounds like, the CSD, the waterfall, absolutely does. And if we take a look at both and we use both of those in context as we walk through this review, I think that what we have here is that dip in the upper mid-range and then this rise in treble territory of 10K and beyond. I think what it's doing is it's isolating some of that top end. And so what we have here is a speaker that can sound a little bit sibilant, and the reason being is, well, that treble, that top end is just kind of hanging out by itself, and had we had a more linear response or a bridge that leads into that top end extension, I have a feeling that it wouldn't be so easy to recognize that top end extension. What does all this mean? Do we have a bright speaker on our hands? The answer to that question is no. You probably think I'm crazy at this point. Let me explain. Believe it or not, brightness in a speaker, for the most part, this isn't always the case, it isn't happening that high. It's actually quite a bit lower than what you would expect. I would expect that where we see this kind of drop in the upper mid-range, if those frequencies were elevated, or in the waterfall, if we saw a lot of stored energy coming our way within that band of frequencies, that would end up being what I would consider, in my opinion, a bright speaker, or a speaker that can often lead to listening fatigue. At no point throughout the evaluation process did I find these to be a fatiguing speaker or a bright speaker. What I am saying is there is some extension way up high that is easy to hear. You notice it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that what we have on our hands is what I would define as, this is hard to listen to. I don't want to listen to these speakers anymore because I'm entering listening fatigue. No, and I want to make this as a very clear point, because the last thing that I want to do is make you think that if you decide to hit the checkout button, you need to buy a pair of earmuffs. You don't. Trust me. What we have here is just some extra air and extension at the very tip top of the frequency band. 10K to 20K, it's way out there. Okay, so don't think for a second that as soon as you have that cymbal strike that you're going to be going, oh man, I don't like that. You won't. Now, I think this is a good segue into Soundstage and Soundstage impressions. The SVS Ultras absolutely can and will disappear, especially if you bring tubes to the party. So with the shit stack, that was why I like that combo so much, is it lended itself to transparency. It lended itself to, wow, where did the SVS Ultras go? I can't find them. And it was wonderful. But I will say this, that there were times as I was making my way through a lot of different tracks, female vocals, dependent on the range of the vocalist, and some percussive type stuff, I couldn't help but notice, there's the tweeter, there's the tweeter. There were times where that sibilance would show up, and then the magic of that disappearing act, it would go away for a short period of time, and I was able to localize the source. I know it's coming from those tweeters. And so I think it's important to keep this review fair and balanced, is that these can disappear depending on the music, but there are times where I think that disappearing act, well, the curtains are pulled back and then you see the guy behind the curtain and you're like, okay, there's the guy behind the curtain, and it happens to be tweeters. And that's kind of a bummer. I wish that I could have given these a 10 out of 10 in the Soundstage department, but it would make me a dishonest reviewer, and that is something that I am not. And so now that we have all of the basic core fundamentals out of the way, we've talked about listening impressions, I'm gonna finish by saying this. Here we are in 2020, and there is a lot of companies out there that are making a lot of bookshelves, and I've noticed a trend, and it kind of drives me crazy. Every single year it seems like, and here's our another attempt at a bookshelf, and here's another attempt at a bookshelf, and oh, this one comes in 37 different colors. The SVS Ultra is the opposite of that. This guy has been on the block for a long time, and they started with solid engineering, and I gotta say, what they ended up with is a real contender on the market and a speaker that you absolutely should consider, especially given the fact that SVS gives you, I think it's what, like 7 years to check out their speakers? It's 45 days, so I was pretty close. You can buy these, check them out for 45 days, and use them in your home theater rig or 2-channel listening, and if you dig them, then you've got a fantastic pair of speakers on your hands, and if not, you can send them back. So who else does that? I don't know, because I don't know of any companies that does that. It's awesome. Another thing that I want to highlight and I want to mention is when I did that teardown, we found what? 5 parts in the crossover. That is amazing. I'm going to tell you why it's amazing. What it shows us is SVS started with the right drivers. If they hadn't started with the right drivers and they were just, oh, let's just throw some stuff together and see what happens, we wouldn't see 5 parts on the crossover. We would see 15 or 20. Let's just see how many parts that we can throw onto this thing to fix it. And they didn't have to, because they started with solid engineering, and I gotta give him kudos for that. So knowing what's on the inside of this speaker, I'm not shocked at all to see that we have a sandcast resistor. I'm not shocked at all to see that we have an electrolytic cap. Yes, I'm going to say this, and yes, it drives a couple of folks crazy. I don't care. I wish that every manufacturer would give us a drop-down option of higher quality components. So SVS, again, if you want my thoughts and my input, that is something that I would encourage you guys to at least consider. Does it come with a recommendation here from New Record Day? Yes, it does. Should you be worried that what we have on our hands is a bright speaker? No, we don't. It's not a bright speaker. It has a tilted top end extension, and depending on the music, that can work to its advantage. On some music selections, you're gonna hear a little bit of sibilance and female vocals, and there are times where the tweeters are gonna call attention to themselves. Are there genuine contenders at the $1,000 price point that don't have those types of problems? Maybe, but guess what? They're gonna have other problems. I promise you that. There is no such thing as a perfect loudspeaker, and there will always be compromises. And for me, this doesn't have a whole lot of compromises. So give them a shot. They're a fantastic loudspeaker, and I have thoroughly enjoyed them from day one to the finish of this review. And for crying out loud, why is it that we can't get other manufacturers to follow suit with cabinets that look like that and all of the attention to detail? In so many ways, SVS knocked this out of the park. In so many ways that it's hard to even bring up some of the nitpicky things, because the SVS Ultra, in so many ways, it is a no compromise, fantastic option for anybody that is into 2-channel stereo, home theater, hi-fi enthusiasts, you name it. It's a good purchase. SVS, thank you so much for giving me the honor of knocking out another review for you guys, and I hope that you can appreciate my thoughts and my opinion about the SVS Ultra bookshelf. And folks, that's not the only speakers that SVS sent my way. Oh yeah, stay tuned, and we'll see you guys in the next video.